This is ESG Decoded, the podcast powered by Global Affairs Associates to provide relevant, actionable updates related to business innovation and sustainability. Join Kaitlyn Allen and Amanda Shea of Global Affairs Associates for thoughtful, nuanced conversations with industry leaders that explore the complexities, the risks, and the opportunities connected to all things ESG. I'm Yvonne Harris, a consultant and co-host, and I will be collaborating with Kaitlyn and Amanda for the discussions that we will present on this podcast. Put simply, ESG is everything that is not on your balance sheet. This leaves room for misunderstanding, oversimplification, and the tendency towards one-size-fits-all perspectives. None of that will happen on this podcast. Enjoy this episode.
Hi, everyone. This is Kaitlyn Allen. It's March 5th, 2021, and for those of you who aren't in the energy biz, you may not know that this week is CERAWeek, one of the most important A-list conferences in the energy world. One of our favorite carbon-negative Houston startups, Cemvita Factory, presented this week, and we wanted to get them on to debrief. Moji Karimi of Cemvita Factory, welcome.
Thank you, Kaitlyn. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. First, I just want to say, why I think Cemvita has such a compelling value proposition. But Moji is, of course, co-founder and CEO, and I'll get to the fun technical stuff. But I just want to say at the very outset, one of my favorite things about your company is that the co-founding team is a brother and sister sibling team. Moji's sister, Tara Karimi, is a renowned scientist, a PhD scientist, and she's sort of the science brains behind all of the research and development. And then Moji brings the commercial expertise as CEO. And so I think that's just, as someone that has close relationships with my siblings, I think it's just really sweet and also amazing. I don't know if I could be in business with my siblings, but it's really great to see that type of collaboration. It's so unique, really. But that aside, I think the Cemvita value proposition really hits so many different areas, right? We're talking about everything from enhanced oil recovery, EOR type technology related to carbon capture, to biomining, to space related applications. I'd love to have you give us just a brief overview for those of the audience that aren't familiar with Cemvita.
Sure. Yeah. And, to your point earlier, people ask me all the time, it's like, how is it like working with your sister? Yeah. And I say, it's much easier than working with your spouse.
That's fair. Yes.
We've kind of been together, through all the ups and downs, and good intentions are there. And as you know yourself, also co-founder is a very, very essential role in any startup, and having that support system. So to have that be, your family, your sibling, I'm very lucky to be in that scenario. And then for Cemvita, the vision is to basically use nature-inspired technologies to solve essential problems like climate change. And in this case, we really delved into the photosynthesis process, where in nature, carbon dioxide and water is converted into oxygen and other chemicals, right? For plants, the classic formula is to sugar. And that's where we started. We said, okay, what if humans could build a system that does the same thing using enzymes and microbes that could replicate what plants do? And so the first pathway that we built was the exact photosynthesis pathway to, convert CO2 to sugar. And that's where the space application was unlocked. And that was for using the CO2 that astronauts breathe out and converting that into sugar, which they could then have as a calorie source, almost like a regenerative life support system on the International Space Station. And a bit down the road on Mars, because 96% of the air is CO2, you could use all that carbon and convert it into a bio-based intermediate like sugar, which could also be used as a building block to make more complex things like nutrients and even pharmaceutics. And that's essential because if we were to actually colonize on Mars, we can't rely on taking everything with us. And that's why, in space, NASA and other companies for a very long time, they have this area of, knowledge and research called in situ resource utilization, which is another way of saying circular economy, right? Using what is available to us at each location as building blocks to make other things that we need and reuse the waste, right?
Absolutely.
So that's where we started. And, then we said, okay, let's now think about what else can we make from CO2? And that's how we, eventually came up with this list of 30 different chemicals that could be made from CO2 through application of, synthetic biology or genetic engineering of microbes that act as a small refineries, basically, through processes very similar to fermentation, like we're already doing for converting sugar to alcohol, or for converting bio-based kind of like corn and sugar to biofuels. But instead of using the yeast, using the microbes that we engineer, and instead of feeding them sugar, feeding them CO2. So that's kind of a CO2-based chemicals division of our company. And because of my background in previous life, looking at DNA of microbes in the subsurface and, understanding the petroleum engineering workflows, we started thinking about CO2 EOR, CO2 sequestration, what more could be done there to increase the efficiency of carbon storage, and to go a step beyond that, to actually use the carbon as a feedstock in the subsurface, not to just store it, but to actually use it, convert it into other useful chemicals. So that then became kind of our vertical today, which what we call subsurface carbon utilization. And on the mining side, early on, when we were discussing with BHP, who ended up becoming one of our biggest customers and also investor, they introduced us to this issues for bioremediation and how they have to use a lot of chemicals to remediate, this kind of post-life era of mining locations. And, again, we looked into nature, and it turns out there are microbes that could absorb some of the unwanted toxic material or heavy metals and remediate the water kind of naturally. And so that became kind of our biomining division, which since then we have expanded into other areas of mining as well, like bioleaching. As you know, mining industry also is really trying to reduce their footprint. But for them, as much as it's about carbon footprint, like oil and gas companies and petrochemicals, but it's also about the actual environmental footprint. So synthetic biology has a solution there as well. And putting all this together, and now it's becoming obvious, like why we keep saying this is a platform. This is not just like one specific solution, but we want to bring synthetic biology to heavy industries through these use cases that, I just talked about.
And I think for those of you who are listening, it's probably become obvious at this point too, why Cemvita comes up in all of the energy transition conversations in Houston. It comes up with our clients a lot because companies that have a very heavy carbon footprint and that are, making net zero targets, setting, and if it's not even net zero, but just setting reduction targets, the appeal of the process that can actually help enable that and kind of enlighten what that pathway is. A lot of companies are making net zero commitments and not without all the information, right? They know they need to do it. They know they can do some more near-term gains, but the path all the way to net zero isn't exactly clear yet. And that's okay, right? We've got time to figure it out. But I think that's why, Cemvita's technology is such a hot topic in the Houston energy industry and beyond Houston, actually, of course, because of the ability to really take something that is, I think, the first presentation I saw you give, Moji, at Energy Dot at the Society for Petroleum Engineers, you had like was it the headless horseman or something, right? The demon, carbon is the demon. And right. Actually turning that into
the Grime Reaper.
There, thank you.
Yeah.
I remember that image. And saying, hey, it doesn't have to be a Grim Reaper, right? Especially now that we're seeing all these initiatives to formalize carbon as an asset class. Well, suddenly you've got something that's a liability that technologies that Cemvita offer can actually turn it into an asset, which I think was something so exciting about this. But let's get to your presentation at CERAWeek this week. I think a lot of people are familiar with perhaps your CCUS, EOR type applications, enhanced oil recovery. I don't know if everyone's had the chance to delve into your next mind-blowing concept, which is the underground refinery. What does the underground refinery mean, and how do you possibly make that happen?
Yeah, so the idea there was to kind of, look at the convergence of a few technologies that already exist. One of those being CO2 sequestration, CO2 EOR. As you know, these are not new to the oil and gas industry at all, right? We've been doing that for the past 50 years. There's a ton of knowledge around them. We know how to do it, the asset, optimization, everything around it. But a lot of these newer technologies for CO2 utilization, they are new to oil and gas industry. Using CO2 as a feedstock, using flue gas for conversion to other, chemicals. And even if you look at a lot of the direct air capture companies, they don't come from oil and gas. They initially started kind of outside of oil and gas, chemical engineering disciplines, and now it's kind of been integrated into oil and gas. So what we're saying was, we are doing these reactions on surface where we're converting CO2 into other materials. We have to build these big tanks and provide the right pressure, temperature, kind of manage the entire process to convert this one, type of carbon into another type of carbon, right? What if we could do that reaction in the reservoir? So thinking of a reservoir, not just as a place where we have a bunch of oil and we go through this kind of primary, secondary, tertiary to just get as much oil as we can out, but to think about it as a place where we could do reactions, because we already have built the pathways to the pore space, right, which are the wells, and we know exactly what's the pressure, what's the temperature, what are the boundaries, all that. So instead of plugging and abandoning a given reservoir after we've gotten the oil out, why not use it as an underground facility, not just for storage of CO2, but to go a step beyond that and actually, convert that CO2 into other useful chemicals. The way that you could do that is by looking at the microbes that are already in the reservoir and saying, okay, are there microbes here that could help us, eat this CO2 and make it into something else? And again, there is, existing technology there as well with microbial enhanced oil recovery, which was the idea to convert, basically to use different sources of nutrients and convert it to biosurfactants in the reservoir in situ. And then that biosurfactant obviously was going to help with the mobility of the oil as a method of tertiary recovery. But in this case, why not use CO2 as the feedstock? So, taking a step back from that, why is this important? Is because, a lot of oil companies, like you said, now they have to have a plan for energy transition. And either you could diversify, invest heavily in renewables and start kind of actually divesting from oil and gas and turn the company from an oil company into an energy company.
And we see several companies doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing to do, but it's also the easy choice and it's the obvious choice. Now, what my message at CERAWeek was, what is the bold choice? The bold choice is to see if I have all these assets, can I, instead of diversify, reinvent the assets into something that already is leveraging the expertise that oil and gas companies have and all the talent that they already have about the subsurface, but build a new pathway to carbon neutral or carbon negative oil and chemicals. Because, in the year 2050, I think, if any company has carbon positive oil, they would not be able to produce it because no one would want that. The value of it is going to be zero. So then the question is, okay, well, how do we make it carbon neutral? And there's examples of it. Oxy is doing it in the Permian Basin because,
Occidental Petroleum, for those who aren't familiar.
Yes, yeah, because when you do CO2 EOR, for each barrel of oil that's produced, you could basically use 500 kilograms of CO2 or half a ton. So what that means is when you look at the amount of CO2 emissions from burning each barrel of oil, that could actually be about the same. So that's how you get to that carbon neutral oil, right? But there's ways that you could go beyond that and actually make the process carbon negative and do it in the subsurface.
I think, it's just kind of mind blowing to think about. I guess this is what I love about entrepreneurs, right? Is you see things that other people don't see, right? There's all these things all around us. The reservoirs are all there. The microbes are all there. Nature's there doing her thing every day. And to have someone go and put that together and say, wait a second, why can't we do what Mother Nature did 50 million plus years ago in a reservoir? We've emptied it, and humans have burned all of that. Why don't we try and make it again? Right? Mm-hmm. It sounds so revolutionary. How do you plan to actually make this happen?
Well, so the thing is, in our industry, one company can't do it all. Like, you have to have partnerships, you have to have collaboration, you have to have others who also see the vision and believe in it and kind of come together, especially for us because of the way things are set up. Operators, service companies, startups, they all have to kind of come together. So this becomes a very collaborative effort. But the starting point is the vision, right? And even in the CERAWeek, what I mentioned was, I know that this is a crazy idea. Like, I get it, but we're an industry built on crazy ideas. Just think about it. Hydraulic fracturing. If you didn't know about it and you were to explain it to somebody and say, "Oh, we're gonna go make all this like explosions and like pressurize to this crazy amounts, you break the rock open, and they'll say, are you crazy? Like, how is that gonna work?" But we're doing it routinely, and we know exactly how to kind of implement it. But the thing is, we've gotten used to it, so we don't think of it as a crazy idea. Now, my question to the audience was like, well, what is the next crazy idea? Because we've just been optimizing everything, but we, at this point, we could continue to optimize, but that's not going to save us by 2050. When you think about energy transition, we need more revolutionary ideas, kind of 0 to 1 type ideas. And this is one. But to, get together, it's actually to test this, it's not that complicated. We start off taking some samples from the reservoir, understand the microbes that are already there, and seeing which ones are the ones that we could use for this purpose. Then we actually test it in a core on surface, and do the conversion, measure the effectiveness. And then if we see the right numbers, then you could go to the field, test it in a kind of one well, in a well that maybe is about to be plugged and abandoned, that does not introduce additional risk to the larger field. And then if you see the right results there, then you expand it to the field. I mean, we've been doing this process for other comparable methods and technologies for a long time. So that's not the showstopper. It's just the companies to say, I'm going to go find out if this could work, and I'm going to go test it. That's kind of the next step.
Amazing. I don't think I have anything to add to that, except that I hope that others can see the vision that you see. I certainly see it myself, and I think it holds incredible promise to help get the world to net zero. So on that note, let me ask you kind of a fun question. We all know that Elon Musk recently offered a $100 million prize for the best carbon capture technology. Any comments on that challenge? We certainly think that no other company does CCUS and space. And so we're kind of hoping in Houston, for all the other folks that are not in Houston, Cemvita is of course based in Houston. Houstonians are really, really hoping that Cemvita is a prime pick candidate. Mm-hmm. What are your comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited about it. And, they're going to announce kind of the details on the Earth Day. I think it's April 20th coming up. But once they kind of announce more details, it seems like that technology proposal is more focused on direct air capture. But for us, we actually focus more on CO2 utilization, turning the CO2 into something, which is an absolute need also for space exploration. But what is unclear at this point is that, was this kind of Elon's thought process for applicability for SpaceX, the other ventures that he's doing, or just the gesture of I'm going to help with this kind of nascent industry by providing this funding to the X Prize Foundation for them to kind of basically take the lead and run the show, similar to the other programs that they've had. Yet to be seen, once they kind of announce the results. But I've always said, I had a presentation in To the Pickering Holt in 2018, and I talked about this, that the space industry has been thinking about CO2 as a valuable resource for a long time. And because they have to, right? If you have a carbon source, if you don't want to take all the things with you, you have to learn, in space, even the astronauts pee and they return it to water, right? So like, what's the difference with carbon? So what can we learn about that? And, turn that into something that leverages the expertise that oil and gas industry has. And the example that I used there was right now, for example, on Mars, you can't take fuels to Mars for the way back. You have to make your fuels on Mars. And both the SpaceX and NASA already have the propellant plants that do that. So get the CO2 from the air and the water, in the case of Mars, from the underneath the Martian regolith, and through this Sabatier reaction, convert that into methane, which is the fuel for the way back, right? So my point was, why wasn't it ExxonMobil or Chevron building that system? Because if there's anyone that knows more than any industry about taking one source of carbon, converting it to another source, it's the oil and gas industry. And CO2 utilization, or CCUS, is an area that is an opportunity for the oil and gas industry to really take the lead. And they have the right infrastructure, the right talent to do that. And in the process, they would also solve their emission problem. So it's kind of a no-brainer. And you're seeing kind of now the industry is going in that direction. So things like this, the work that SpaceX is doing, the plants that they're building in South Texas, or wanting to kind of create different ways to have access to methane. CCUS could also provide some of those pathways. So hopefully this prize eventually would also lead in that direction to bring the space industry and the oil and gas industry kind of closer together to building out this type of sustainable systems.
I think you bring up a really important point, which is we need oil and gas to get to net zero as humanity, right? As a planet. We can't do that without this industry. And I think that's something a lot of folks unfortunately don't understand, is that there's so much talent, so much capital. And now that's all coupled with a drive to be part of the solution. I mean, I think we see all over the place, very clear signals from the industry that, generally speaking, obviously there's some laggards here and there, but generally speaking, I think the industry is, fully on board with with energy transition. It's just a matter now of saying, how do we do this? And I think, Cemvita offers some really very clear pathways to do that. So anyhow, I'm really grateful that you've been on. I'd like to ask if you had any other closing things to add, and then I'm going to ask you a fun pop question.
I just had another thought in the last point that you were mentioning about innovation. There's a lot of models that are available, when you think about not just optimizing, but really changing kind of the next revision of a model, reinvention. And take SpaceX as an example, right? I mean, the main innovation is reusable rockets, right? Because before that, you use a rocket and then you burn it, and it's an absolute waste of money, right? And by the invention of reusable rockets, now enabled all these amazing things that they plan to do, including, colonizing Mars. And if you think about the oil and gas industry, we find oil somewhere, we, have a field development plan, we go build all this like infrastructure, drilling wells and everything, and we get as much of the oil that we could out. Then what do? Plug and abandon, move on to the next one, right? Billions of dollars are spent, and we'll just move on from this subsurface facility that we've built. And actually, we spend more money for the plug and abandonment itself. So why not reuse that? Because now we're looking for ways to, store CO2 in the subsurface, or if we could turn it into something else that is going to give us more than that $50 of, 45Q. And the technology is there, is just to have the vision and the will to wanting to do so. So companies like Cemvita, that's kind of the message that we're hoping that to bring to the industry, and with the leaders and the big companies to come together and to go do this, because based on first principles, it's all possible. It's just a matter of humans kind of getting together and trying it.
Absolutely. That's where all big ideas start, right? And I certainly hope it comes to fruition. Let me ask you a fun question. What is the last road trip you took? Where'd you go? Why? What'd you do?
So the last one for us was, as you guys know, and hopefully you did okay, we had this winter storm in Houston. And after a week of not having heat or water and this and that, we decided to just kind of get out of town for a weekend. And, initially we wanted to go to Louisiana because they're not on the Texas grid, right? But I checked in and I realized, Freeport also they're doing okay with the, having access to electricity and everything. So we decided to go to Freeport, which is about an hour from Houston. Actually, I thought it was going to be much farther, but it wasn't. And what was amazing when we got there was just like, it's kind of surreal. Like you have all these refineries that you're kind of driving through, and then behind it is the beach. And the beach was pretty nice compared to Galveston, and very kind of nice and relaxing weekend. I definitely recommend for those who have the same appreciation as me for like the industrial vibe to go there. It's kind of a bit strange. I was not expecting, because they have a beautiful beach, but when you go close to the beach, it's as if the beach was discovered 2 weeks ago. Like there's no really infrastructure or a lot of things. So, but because of that, there is a lot of room, which is perfect, under a pandemic scenario to go. So we'll definitely continue to explore Freeport from here on as well.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Freeport as like a destination, right? Because because it is refinery after refinery. It's pretty incredible to drive through that and see. I mean, really, as far as I can see, which is, it's flat. So it's not that far that you can see, but it is true. Like there are points driving those roads where all you can see is refineries. And I mean, I guess some people like that.
Yeah, I like the view of refineries because it's a reminder of these are really complex engineering, models that is being built, which is the reason that we have everything that we have, but people kind of take all that for granted, right? And even this winter storm, I think, was a reality check for how delicate, this kind of entire supply chain could be. And once we don't have something for 2 days, then we start to appreciate having it. And, but now it's the time where it's not just about having those things, but they have to be done in a sustainable way. So, my dream and vision is to, when I drive down Pasadena 10, 20 years from now, to see, not just refineries, but biorefineries that have figured out how to use their emissions and circle it back and turn the carbon into other chemicals and kind of be emission free. And, based on our discussion today, those things are possible. It's just, for companies and governments and everybody to kind of work together to make it happen.
Wow, Moji, I think you've changed how I see that view, because often driving down, I'm like, shielding my eyes. Let's pretend that's not there because I'm trying to go to the beach and I want it to be really pretty. But actually, I love the idea of driving by and just envisioning what it could look like in 20 years when our kids are grown and we've all been kind of part of this transition, right? As from the beginning, kind of, and kind of getting to see it all there. I think that's going to make my drives to Freeport much nicer. Thank you.
I hope so. Yeah, you should definitely try it.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, we're really grateful to have you on. For those of you who didn't have access to the CERAWeek broadcast, we understand that the Rice University Alliance will also be posting the video. Is that correct, Moji?
That's what I was told, and I hope they do, but I'm not responsible if they don't. So don't get mad at me. I hope that they do.
Okay. Well, and if not, of course, there's if you just go to cemvitafactory.com, you can check out lots of resources to learn more about about the technology and check out their LinkedIn and all of that sort of thing. Anything else, Moji?
No, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for listening to ESG Decoded. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you consume yours and follow ESG Decoded and Global Affairs Associates across social media platforms. Until our next episode, take what you learned today to drive long-term value for your organization by doing good for people and for the planet.